One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast. Today on the show, we've got Matthew Gowen. Matthew's the SVP of Sales at Pangea, and he is a longtime tech industry veteran. Started actually his career in the pharmaceutical sales industry, but really, he grew up in kind of financial services software sales, spent a lot of time at Thomson Reuters, spent a lot of time at Veeva, helping them grow from a few hundred people to a few thousand, from over 150 million in revenue to 700 million in revenue, and has really been a longtime expert, particularly in EMEA software sales. So I think it's a great conversation. Now, before we get there, we want to thank our sponsors. Our first sponsor is Chorus.ai. Chorus is the conversation intelligence platform that provides key insights into the sales conversations your team is having every day. Record, share, review, and coach your team based on the voice of your customer. With Chorus.ai, get your reps to hit quota consistently, ramp your new hires faster, and replicate your unicorns through coaching initiatives, all while together fully remote. Go to Chorus.ai/sales hacker to try it for yourself. Our second sponsor is Outreach, the #1 sales engagement platform. Outreach revolutionizes customer engagement by moving away from siloed conversations to a streamlined and customer-centric journey. Leveraging the next generation of artificial intelligence, the platform allows sales reps to deliver consistent, relevant, and responsible communication for each prospect every time, enabling personalization at scale. Previously unthinkable. Check out www.outreach.io for more information. And finally, listen, we just turned saleshacker.com into a community. Rather than just reading or listening, you can now ask questions and get amazing, thoughtful answers from the world's B2B sales professionals who have been there before. Plus, you can share all of your great experience with others. The community on saleshacker.com is also the only place we can host Ask Me Anythings with guests like Matt Dixon, author of The Challenger Sale. So go to saleshacker.com and create your profile today. Now, without further ado, let's listen to my interview with Matthew Gowen. Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast. Today, I've got on the show Matthew Gowen. Matthew is a 20-year veteran of the technology industry. He actually started his career in pharmaceutical research in the US many years ago. But over the last decade or so, he's had a number of really important opportunities to develop his career. One was at Thomson Reuters, where he ended up running their enterprise sales team. He also ran the EU sales organization at Veeva for over 5 years and helped that company grow to over 700 million in revenue. Today, he is running the sales organization at a company called Pangea, where they help scale up tech companies and expand their business into new markets, primarily in Europe. And so Matthew and his team help companies that are trying to enter Europe. Did I get all of that correct, Matthew?
You did. Thanks very much, Sam. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
We're excited to have you. So we like to start. I gave a little bit of an overview of your background, but we like to start with your baseball card, as we say. So first of all, did I pronounce your last name correctly?
Yeah, Matthew Gowen.
Awesome. Well, I'm delighted about that. Your official title is SVP Sales, and then did I pronounce Pangea the way that you prefer to pronounce it?
It is like the old continent, bringing the world back together. Pangea.
Wonderful. So tell us about the company. What do you all do?
Yeah, so we help tech companies scale into new markets. The majority of our clients are US tech companies coming to Europe for the first time, and we help them put in place the right talent, the right sales infrastructure, and also the back office boring stuff that you need to get done, payroll and legal contracts, all of that good stuff, which can be a bit of a hurdle for a lot of companies coming to Europe. And so we take away that hassle and risk and just help tech companies focus on top-line revenue growth.
How long has the company been around?
So we've been around for about 2.5 years now. I've been at the company for 18 months. It was founded by a guy called Mark Baumgartner. He's an American guy, actually, but lives in Geneva. And he convinced me to move away from Veeva to start this new and exciting opportunity. So we're having a lot of fun doing it.
That's fantastic. So first of all, let's just get to know you a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get into sales originally? Obviously, it sounds like you're a Brit, but give us, more context on your upbringing and your childhood, and then we'll dive into some of the topics that are of interest, because I think a lot of people want to know how to enter the EU. But first, let's start with you. Tell us about your background.
Yeah, great. Well, I'm from a place called Hull in Yorkshire in the north of England, and a pretty busy childhood with 3 older sisters and a brother. So we had lots of friends, always lots of chaos and drama going on at home. And of course, unbeknownst to me at the time, that was setting me up pretty well for a life in sales. So I always had a pretty strong desire to see the world, though. And at school they tell join the army, see the world type stuff. But actually, get into sales, see the world is probably a better idea. So when I left college, I had the opportunity to move to Boston in the US, where I spent 5 years over there. Learned a lot. Met my wife whilst I was over there as well, and actually learned a lot about hard work and developing a strong work ethic, something which, of course, you really need in sales. And then moving from more of a technical role into, first of all, pre-sales, where I became an application scientist. But I knew sales is where all the money and the glory was at. So I petitioned the sales manager at the time, a guy called John Upton, to give me a chance. And after some convincing, he finally relented, and I got my first sales gig, and actually selling analytical instruments. And it was much tougher than I thought. I had this concept of being a natural salesperson, but I was quickly relieved of that notion and found out actually sales is pretty tough. You've got to have a good process. But I worked hard. I read a lot, did training courses, and eventually I became pretty good at it and turned into a pretty successful career so far, thankfully.
So I have a question. You mentioned when you went to the States, you learned a lot about hard work. What was it? What lessons are you thinking of as you relate that tidbit? What was it about moving to the U.S. that sort of triggered a surge in your work ethic?
Yeah, well, it was a little bit the environment I was in. It was a Harvard MIT spin-off biotech that I started at. Everybody was just so passionate about what they were doing, and I really got absorbed into that, and really long hours because everyone had a bit of skin in the game with some options in the company, and we had grand visions. Of course, we got acquired in the end, and nobody got anything. But that was a separate story.
Well, you have an exit to your name, at least. Multiple, but that was the first one.
Yeah, that was it. So it was just being with a group of people that were just relentless, actually, and it just absorbed into my DNA. And also, I grew up in a family of hard workers, but that really gave me a lot of focus. And lots of long days and evenings and Saturdays. And actually, when I brought that sort of work ethic back to the UK, it actually put me head and shoulders above a lot of other salespeople who.
Wow. Are you saying that people in the UK don't work very hard?
I'm saying no, a lot of people work very hard. But you've got to learn how to that work ethic, and sometimes it comes from having a good manager, or wherever it comes from. You just got to learn it.
Yeah. Well, fair enough. So what the thing that Pangea does is you help U.S. companies, or I guess any company, but often U.S. companies enter the European market. So let's start with the common mistakes. What are the big mistakes that most companies make when they're not hiring Pangea? And what are the key incorrect assumptions that they make as they try to enter a new market, but particularly the EU?
Yeah, well, I think there's first of all, you've got to tap into a talent network. So the first thing you want to do when you come over to Europe is you want to hire the right people. But if you don't know who those people are, you end up working with maybe some recruiters, and that costs money, and maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. So that's the first problem that a lot of tech companies face. The second part is, how do you support and enable salespeople when they're potentially thousands of miles away from headquarters? You need the right sort of sales enablement and culture wrapped around them. And then the other piece, which is a hurdle, is just getting into local markets. So, of course, you want proximity to customers. You want to be in France, Germany, Switzerland, UK, you name it, wherever your customers are. But you don't necessarily want to have to put people on the ground in all of those different regions and have all of the hassle that comes along with that, whether it's getting your company entity set up, your payroll, putting offices in place, all of that sort of back office effort, which actually what you do want to do is build your pipeline and then decide where to build your business from there. So Pangea tries to put that the right way round. So we'll help tech companies come to Europe. We'll give them access to a trusted talent network through our team at Pangea. But then when it comes to the actual employment part of taking somebody on, we do that at Pangea, but then we deploy that person to the tech company. And they become completely white labeled, like any other salesperson in a tech organization working with product and with marketing and with management. The difference is, though, that Pangea will wrap around those salespeople in Europe and help them with a sales enablement layer, whether that's access into industry, whether it's the right partner ecosystem, really supporting what we like to call the network effect, putting that in place to help people be successful. And then the final piece, as I mentioned, taking all that hassle off, the back office hassle, because we're already set up to go across most major markets in Europe and North America. So just focus on sales, really, and getting that piece right.
How has Brexit changed or will change your business, do you think?
Well, I think that for our business, complexity is good. And so I think it will help Pangea. And, I'm pleased there's got to be some winners out of the Brexit situation. So I think that will be us. So I don't think we work with software mostly as well. And I think of probably one of the most stable industries to be in with the whole Brexit situation.
Are more companies opening in Amsterdam or continental Europe versus London? Is London still going to be and for example, do you, as Pangea, are your offices primarily in London, even when you need German speakers or Spanish speakers or Portuguese speakers or whatever it may be? Or do you have people on the ground in each country so that they can sort of interact in the native tongue of the country that they're selling into?
Yeah, great question. So we believe in proximity, so that salespeople should be on the ground, be able to get on site as quickly as possible or as easily as possible, and to be able to walk the halls of a prospective client or a current customer. That means that Pangea has to be a little bit more distributed. So we have an office in Geneva, London, Berlin, a few other places. We're actually just setting up in Spain as well. So we have all that infrastructure in place to help the team.
Good. Well, in the course of, again, like the nice thing about working at a company like you do is that you get to see a lot of different companies and a lot of different products and a lot of different go-to-market motions. When you think about some of the biggest lessons that you've learned from working with these customers, what do you think they are?
Yeah. I'm in a really privileged position because I get to almost condense a career that most people would have over a few decades of maybe 5, 6, 7 different companies, and I'm able to get that viewpoint in months, or certainly in these past 18 months. So having that viewpoint, I really think a lot of organizations, they don't necessarily focus on the fundamentals, which I think are absolutely critical in setting up that sales organization. Having the right go-to-market is really important, but unless you've got the right foundations in place, it can be a struggle. So, for me, it's not just about hiring the right sales talent and giving them the product training and the introductions to the team that any salesperson would need to be successful. In my view, having a successful sales process and outcome is really a holistic company approach and takes a tremendous amount of teamwork. So I've seen that when a organization hires that team, they really should spend a lot of time just asking themselves a lot of questions. What is the sales process that the organization is using? What does it mean? What's that language that salespeople speak? What is sales and operations and enablement, and who is it, and what do they do? What does marketing do in detail, and for what purpose? Does everybody know their roles, responsibilities, and who's accountable for what? And I think quite often it makes a lot of sense to really go through that together as a team and to document it. And it's not as easy as you think. And I think having that kind of alignment within an organization will save you a lot of heartache and pain downstream from really misaligned expectations. So, really, I see so many companies just not having the right sales foundation set up for success. And the tone of a change that needs to happen must be set by the CEO. And of course, spearheaded by sales. Some companies have, hey, that's the sales guy's job. Or there's a throwing stuff over the wall mentality. And really, everybody's got to be on the same page if you want to be effective in enterprise sales and really grow the organization.
Well, one of the pushbacks you might hear from a CEO or a founder or an executive team that is not sales or marketing focused would be, Matthew, we understand that we need a sales process and sales enablement. That's why we're hiring a chief revenue officer or an SVP of sales to help us build those things. I can't document them in the abstract. Do you think that that's sort of like looking at it from the wrong perspective, given that so many companies hire too senior too early?
To some extent, I think, people, that VP hire, that CRO hire is absolutely critical. But for me, it's not an abdication of responsibility from the CEO. It has to be a partnership, and they have to, because sales isn't just about the sales team. It's about all of the other, supporting infrastructure around that as well. So just making sure everyone sings from the same hymn sheet, and ensuring that everybody's doing the right things. I'm sort of a believer in, doing the right things every day, and eventually, you'll get the right results. Sort of got to believe in the universe a little bit in sales, and I think that it's critical that CRO CEO just has a very tight relationship and work together.
How do you educate some of these early stage, founders and kind of optimists when they're convinced that they don't really need sales because the product speaks for itself? What do you say in response? And do you believe, I guess, in enterprise sales that the best product always wins?
So I think a lot of organizations think the product can sell itself, but I think you need to have the right sales foundations in place to make sure that you can have, so that you're building those right sales muscles for success. So it's just making sure that the right processes are in place to make sure that you have that effective outcome, and convincing CEOs of that. Actually, it's looking at what they want to achieve, and then working backwards from that, and then looking at the metrics that you need to achieve as a sales team to be able to achieve those goals. And just reframing things, I think, for an executive team can be really helpful, and giving them that sales filter when quite often they're quite product orientated.
Fair enough. So, we're recording this on April 28th, sort of the end of April. How is the coronavirus, how has COVID affected your business? Positively, negatively, flat?
Yeah, so I think, I think there's a negative impact for almost everybody. I think some organizations seem to be having a successful period of time. But I think, for us, if you want to be, there aren't too many better industries to be in. We typically work with tech companies, quite a lot of life sciences tech organizations as well. And then you layer on top of that sales, which is not, it's about as critical as it can be now, certainly coming out of this, the COVID process. So yeah, there's been a little bit of impact in terms of some projects being frozen, but for the most part, I see this opportunity. This is an opportunity to plan, prepare, and to move forward for success. But don't want to be too disconnected with a pretty difficult situation globally. But we've got to be optimistic, if nothing else. So yeah, I think it'll be onwards and upwards for Pangea. But I'm certainly conscious that it's tough times for people. So you've got to really lead with empathy, I think, more than anything.
How are you advising your clients on scenario planning and forecasting? Do you have guidance that you give them as they think about, particularly if they're making an investment into Europe and thinking about the ROI of that investment? Are you helping recalibrate the plan, manage expectations? What advice are you giving to your customers as they try to navigate this crisis?
So I think the TAM, if you like, is the same. I think your approach to it might be slightly different. And ultimately, everybody's an inside sales team right now. So during this period of time, it's about refocusing the team, making sure that they're going through the right processes to have that sort of outreach to customers. And we're encouraging salespeople to work in a slightly different way now. But I think ultimately, when it comes to sort of forecasting and planning for the future, there's a few different approaches that you would look at. And I think this concept of the top-down sort of forecasting is kind of out the window. I think it's really a bottoms-up approach now. What are your prospective and customers doing on the ground? How can you translate that into your business and what the growth opportunity is? And for that, you really need information on the ground from the sales team. So I'm encouraging our customers to make sure that they've got that engagement with the team on the ground, the salespeople, feeding that information back internally, and seeing what adjustments might need to be made. I think the reality is we'll have a dip this year, but I'd like to think certainly in the software space next year could be big.
Yeah, makes sense. When you think about, again, sort of coming back to this recruitment question, you've said that, the recruitment market is ready for disruption. Why do you think that?
Well, I think ultimately recruitment, there's just not enough skin in the game for a recruiter. So first of all, there's tons of them out there, and we all get tons of emails from them. And I do a lot of recruitment. It's a tough gig. I really know these guys work hard, but they're very focused on getting people through the door, getting people hired, getting people paid, moving on to the next one. And I think the approach that we're taking at Pangea is a little bit different to that. We're saying, look, we're going to help with the recruitment, but because we do the employing on our side in the end, we are as invested in this person's success as the tech company is. And therefore, doing whatever it takes to help make sure those people are successful in the short, medium, and long term, I think that's just a really important component, which recruiters are kind of totally missing at the moment. So I think that is an industry which is ready for disruption. And that's also part of the problem is so many people can do it with access to tools like LinkedIn. Finding people is not hard. It's timing and convincing and helping those people that you're there for them to help them develop their career.
Do you think, besides obvious, language differences, are there cultural differences that maybe American companies or Asian companies that are trying to enter EMEA don't appreciate when they think about building it? Is a successful sales culture in Europe different than a successful sales culture in the US?
Yeah, it's subtly different. I think that's also part of what we're trying to do at Pangea, because treating Europe like it's the US when you come over here for the first time is I would argue not the right approach. And you've got to break it into different regions and then have local speakers or local language speakers in certain regions, which can really help with those relationships. Sales is very similar in Europe to North America, but there's just some extra layers of complexity that you have to deal with. Language is one of them, but culture is another. So I don't know necessarily if sales culture is different, but I think buying culture is different. The way that Germans will buy is very different from how French and the UK will buy. And
tell us how do Germans buy?
Just super skeptical. So they'll make you jump through lots and lots of hoops, lots of hurdles, lots of RFPs, very critical. So building that relationship in Germany is very challenging. It's really interesting though, because when you get to that closed stage of the deal, then actually they'll work with you completely differently. Suddenly you'll go perhaps onto first name terms, and you might not have been before then. So very different to how you might work in the US, to my experience. And then Southern Europe, really different. It's very cost orientated. So lots of negotiation rounds, which is a challenge. But some of the countries that adopt technologies faster would be places in the Nordics, like Denmark. Actually, places like Belgium and the Netherlands adopt technologies pretty fast. And then the UK, I think, is the closest that, as you would expect, to the way that the US buy.
I hear you on those skeptical buyers, but maybe I guess there's a silver lining in the sense that at least you don't get happy ears and are overly, because sometimes it's worse to get positive affirmation the entire sales process and then realize that you didn't qualify properly and they actually weren't serious. But you learn that months into the sales cycle.
You can't really not qualify properly in Europe. It's they put you. There's just so many hoops to go through, and of course you can have happy ears, but it's a bit harder.
Fair enough. When you think about technology or tools, is the tech stack that you're using different in Europe, or is it the same and you're using the same sales engagement tools and things like that? Or when you think about like technology that's helping you generate meetings and generate opportunities, what do you think of?
Yeah, I think the technology is mostly the same. Of course, look, everyone's using LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Can't really live without that. But also leveraging, we always recommend tools like Outreach for sales email automation. Can be really useful in tracking those sorts of metrics. Of course, there's others out there. My team really like things like Lusher, Discover.org, because really finding those email contacts is just so difficult. And one company I like to work with is a company in London called Cognism, and they really help with email identification. But actually, a tool which I'm a big fan of at the minute is called Octopus. It's a LinkedIn automation tool, and helps you do sequenced outreach on LinkedIn. And I like it because it works, it's cheap, and it's saved me tons of time over the past 6 months or so since I've started using it.
Are there regulations or prohibitions against cold calling in Europe? Are we allowed to use the phone, or is it you're allowed to? And I'm thinking of Lucia because a lot of people use Lucia for personal phone numbers sometimes because that's just a place to get them. Is cold calling acceptable in Europe?
Look, so GDPR is a thing, and you have to be very much aware of that in Europe. And but ultimately, you've got to do sales. So there's a multi-channel outreach. Cold calling is part of that. Emails are part of that. LinkedIn connections are part of that. So it's a rhythm of different sorts of activities that relate to one another. So yes, you can do cold calling, but you have to be cognizant around GDPR.
Understood. Matthew, we're coming to the part of the show where we want to hear about your influences. Who are the folks? It could be books you've read, could be like a great sales book that you always recommend to your new hires, or it could be a manager or a founder or a CEO or an entrepreneur that really inspired you. When you think of key influences that you want us to know about, who are some of the folks that come to mind or some of the ideas?
Yeah, well, there's of course books that you read, and some of those have had a big impact on me over my career. One was a book called The Rules of Work by Richard Templar, which I really liked. I read that quite some time ago now, but there was a lot of useful tips in there. Think and Grow Rich was something by Napoleon Hill, was a book I read 5 or 6 years ago and opened my eyes to a new way of doing things, and interested in what Malcolm Gladwell's doing. I've just finished one of his books, and yeah, lots of good managers. When I was at Thomson Reuters, they had a really good management team that I learned a lot from. The head of sales there was a guy called Rob Greenwood. He's now the CEO of a company called SciBite. He was really instrumental in the early days of my career in becoming a leader. Also, people like Richard Neal, too, a guy who helped me refine some of my skills in the early days. But in terms of founders that I have learned a lot from, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to say anyone other than the CEO and founder of Veeva, a guy called Peter Gassner. Growing a company from $0 to $1 billion is pretty legit. So definitely learned a lot from him, and he's an exceptional leader. And I learned a lot about how he thinks about business, the competition, and customer success. So yeah, lots of people over the years. Actually, interestingly, I had some coaching last year from a guy called Humphrey Walter. He was the performance coach for England Rugby, and it was really interesting to see how he thinks about performance. So I really enjoyed that session too.
Anything you can share with us from that session? What were some insights that the English Rugby Football Club practices that we can take with us on our day-to-day?
Yeah, well, it's this concept of marginal gains, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Just doing lots of things, 1% better every day is going to lead to significant results downstream. So levels of professionalism that you want to focus on, simple things. Just don't be late for meetings. Just be prepared, have a plan. And so there's things like that, pretty obvious, but it's good when you can go through a session with someone to go through some of those details and how it relates to you. But also objective setting and thinking about what you want to achieve in the future, and then taking that a step backwards. Okay, well, how am I tracking against that? What do I need to do to achieve these things, and what am I doing today? So it was coaching sessions, really.
Makes a lot of sense. Matthew, if folks are listening and they want to reach out to you, what's the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn pretty easily. Matthew Gowen.
Wonderful. Matthew, thanks so much for being on the show. And we'll talk to you on Friday for Friday Fundamentals.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me, Sam.
Hey, everybody. Sam's Corner. It's Sam Jacobs, of course. Thanks so much for listening. That was a great conversation with Matthew Gowen. I think one of the things that we talked about is just this reality that cultural differences are real, regulatory issues are real. And so when you're entering EMEA, and we've had this conversation, we had it with Patrick Svanstrom from Datadog, but I do think it's important that people understand that entering Europe is more than just entering Europe. It's also entering all of the different dialects, all of the different cultures, all of the different traditions, and really thinking about what's the smartest, best, most effective way to do that. Of course, Brexit's also going to create additional regulatory complexity, and that's why I think, particularly when it's about starting offices overseas, onboarding and support to those different regional time zones is so important. So I really enjoyed that conversation with Matthew Gowen. Now, if you want to reach out to me, you can, linkedin.com/Sam F. Jacobs. Please give us a 5-star review on iTunes if you haven't already. And we want to thank our sponsors, Chorus.ai, the leading conversation intelligence platform that provides key insights into the sales conversations your team is having every day. Go to Chorus.ai/saleshacker to try it for yourself. And our second sponsor is Outreach, of course, the #1 sales engagement platform. Go to Outreach.io for more information. And don't forget, create your profile on saleshacker.com and join the community over there. That is going to be fantastic and a fantastic complement to some of the other communities that exist already. Obviously, I'm talking about Revenue Collective, which is the one that I run. So go to saleshacker.com and we look forward to seeing you there. And if you want to reach out to me, you can. Otherwise, talk to you next time.